Hey, this is Katie from KT and the Squid. In this video, I'm going to show you how to crochet the picnic scarf. Be sure to subscribe to my channel if you're interested in anything crochet related or yarn related. I share lots of crochet tutorials as well as crochet related product reviews. So the picnic scarf is a scarf that I designed years and years and years ago. It's a really easy, super simple scarf. I've updated it and modernized it. I've added some more stripes as well as some fringe just to make it a little bit more modern and a little bit more wearable. So this project is great for beginner crocheters. The only thing that you need to know how to do is how to single crochet and double crochet and chain. There is color changing, but I will show you how to do that in this video. But if you know how to do those three things, then you should be good to go. So I'm posting this video in November because I also think that this scarf would make a great gift. I love giving crochet items as gifts that are things that people will actually use. And a scarf is a great gift because who doesn't love a great scarf? So hopefully with it being November, you have time to make it and give it as a gift. Or if you're just learning how to crochet, like I said, this is a great beginner project, and in the end you have something that's super wearable and you might actually learn a couple new things with the color changing. So first I want to talk about the yarn that we're going to be using for this project. My friends at Universal Yarn was kind enough to send me the yarn for this scarf. So I am using Uptown worsted. This is probably the nicest acrylic yarn that I've used. So I love that it is anti-pilling, and I have actually tested it back years ago when I was doing yarn reviews, like super detailed yarn reviews. I washed it, I think 4 or 5 times, and it didn't pill. It held up really nicely. So it says anti-pilling, and it means anti-pilling. I actually have a sweater made in this that I wear all the time. I've had it for I think it's 5 or 6 years. And it still looks great. Not only does it hold up really well, it's really, really soft. Normally when you get acrylic yarn and you first use it, it can be a little bit stiff, but this yarn is so nice, it's super soft, and it, even though I use a plastic hook for making this scarf, it glides really nicely. I was saying it has a nice glideability to it. I don't know if that's actually a word, but it glides really nicely on your hook, which makes it so much more enjoyable when you're actually making your project. So for the colors, for my first color, so this will be color A, I am using this beautiful gray color, which is called Donahue, and this gray is like my go-to gray color. It is beautiful. I have a sweater in this color, and if you're looking for a nice gray, this is the one that you want. I love this color. And then for color B, I am using this kind of mauve-y pinky color, and it is called Antique Rose, and I love this color. This is probably my favorite like pinky color to use. And then I have another neutral here, this kind of taupe color, which is called Acorn, and it's just a nice soft brown, another great neutral. So in the pattern, which I didn't mention is available for free on my site, I list how much of each color you will need, so be sure to reference the pattern. You will also need a crochet hook. So I am using a size J, which is a 6 millimeter, but you will need whatever gauge to get, or whatever hook to get the correct gauge. So I have a hook review of these Prym ergonomic hooks if you want to check that out. Also, if you don't know how to make a gauge swatch, I have a video explaining in detail how to make a gauge swatch. Gauge isn't super important for this project because, I mean, it's a scarf, so if it's slightly off, it'll still be okay. But I do recommend making a gauge swatch because you do want to get fairly close so that you're not super off. You also want to kind of see what the fabric's going to look like in whatever yarn you choose, just so you get an idea if it's going to be too dense or too loose. So be sure to do a gauge swatch just to see how the finished fabric is going to come out. Speaking of my gauge swatch, it's actually right here. So this is what it looks like, and it's a really nice fabric. You might also find it helpful to have some stitch markers. You will need to keep track of how many rows that you work as we're going. So I like these stitch markers that are numbered. They are numbered by 20, so it's 20, 40, 60, 80, 100. I sell these in my Etsy shop. Of course, you don't have to use these super cute stitch markers. You can use any stitch markers you'd like. You can use bobby pins or safety pins or even scrap pieces of yarn. I just think that it's really fun to use stitch markers like this. You will also need, obviously, a pair of scissors when you need to fasten off. You'll also need a ruler, which I don't have here, just to check your gauge swatch and to maybe measure your scarf and measure the fringe when we get there. You also might find it helpful to have one of these fabric cutters. It's a rotary fabric cutter to cut the fringe. I find that it just makes cutting the fringe super quick and easy. If you don't have one of these, you can just use a pair of scissors though. So this scarf has a super fun stripe pattern to it. I love playing with stripes, but I hate having extra ends to weave in. So I specifically designed this scarf so that you don't have all those extra ends to weave in every time you change color. So I will explain how that works in just a second, but I'm just going to tell you how things are going to go. So the first half of the scarf, you are going to stripe between color A and color B. And then the second half of the stripe is you're going to swap out color B for color C. So you're going to stripe between color A and color C. So that's how it's going to work. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to just make a small sample just to show you how it works up, but just be mindful that it will turn out much larger. So first I'm going to explain how the striping is going to work. Like I said, I designed this pattern so that there's no extra ends to weave in. This is my actual scarf. I haven't woven in any ends yet, and as you can see, there's no extra ends on either side that I have to weave in. All I have to do is weave in the start and the end of each skein. So how this is going to work is we have color A, we have color B, and then we have what I'm calling color A2. We're going to start with color A, and you're going to work 2 rows of color A. Then you're going to work 1 row of color B. And then you're going to work 2 rows of color A2. So A2 and A are the same color. They're just, I'm pulling them from different skeins so that I don't have those extra, I don't have to fasten off every time so that I have to pick up the skein again after I do 1 row of color B. This might not make much sense now, but I will show you in a minute. So basically, when you're working with 3 colors, it's like a magic number when it comes to crocheting because you don't have to fasten off. Because once you finish your row, the next color is there ready for you to pick up. So again, so here's my scarf. I'll just show you. This is color A, which is coming from this skein. This is color B, which comes from this skein, and this is color A2, which comes from this skein. So A and A2 are the same color, they're just coming from a different skein. Or if you're not working from a different skein, if you want to work from the same skein, you can pull one end from the center and then you can pull the other end from the outside. So like I said, I'm just going to crochet up a smaller size sample so that you can see how this all comes together. So we'll get started with that. So here I have color A, which is what I'm going to start with. And in the pattern, it's going to tell you to chain 35. Now, I also want to say that if you wanted to adjust the size of this scarf, you can. All you have to do is chain an odd number and the pattern will still work. So if you wanted to make it larger or smaller, feel free to do that. But I'm going to tell you how to follow the pattern. So in the pattern it tells you to chain 35. I'm just going to chain any odd number to make a smaller size sample. So here I have 11. I think that's a good size to have here. So for the first row, you're going to work into the chains, obviously, and then the second row is just going to be the same row that you repeat throughout the scarf. So once you get the second row done, you get that down, you'll be good to go. You'll know what to do for the rest of the scarf. So to start row 1, you're going to single crochet into the second chain from your hook, and then you're going to double crochet in the next chain. Then you'll single crochet into the next chain and double crochet into the next. And it's really that simple. You're going to repeat that all the way across. And I also want to point out, when I work into my chains, I work into that back bump so that the bottom is nice and neat like that. So single crochet and double crochet. And because we worked an odd number of chains, when you get to the end, you should always end with a double crochet. So here I am at the last chain, and like I said, you end with a double crochet. And that's what it should look like. Obviously, it's just going to be wider. Now row 2 is basically a repeat of that, only you're working into the stitches. So we're going to chain 1 and turn, and that chain does not count as a stitch. You'll single crochet into the first, and then double crochet into the next. Single crochet into the next, and then double crochet. And it's really that simple. That is the pattern all the way across. So if you ever get lost, maybe you set your hook down or something, you're always going to single crochet into a double crochet, and then you double crochet into the single crochet. And like I said, you should always end with a double crochet into the last stitch. Now, this is row 2. Like I said, we're doing 2 rows of color A, then 1 row of color B. So to change colors, you're not going to complete the last step of the last stitch of before you change colors. So do not fasten off, leave that, because we don't want those extra ends to weave in later, like I said. So now it's time to pick up color A, or color B. So here I have color B. Now to do this, I'm simply just gonna lay this yarn over my hook, and then I'll complete the last step of that last stitch with a, and pull through those 2 loops. So now, you want to be mindful when you're changing colors, because I won't pick this next color up until 1, 2, 3, like three more rows. So you don't want this big float hanging out on the side, because I didn't design this scarf to have an edging to hide any of those floats. So you're going to have like this awkward piece of yarn hanging on the side of your scarf, and you don't want that to happen. So here I'm going to show you the scarf that I was working on so I can show you how neat my ends are. So what I do is I actually tuck those floats in so that you can't see them. So that's what I'm going to show you how to do. And it's a little tricky the first couple rows, so I'll show you a few times. So next I'm going to start with a chain 1 and turn to start the next row. So when I chain 1, and it can get a little fiddly because you got to make sure what ends you're working with here, because this isn't my working yarn, that's my end that I want to leave. So I'm going to chain 1 with my working yarn, and as I chain 1, I'm going to tuck that A color in between my chain so that it's being brought up and I'm not seeing that weird float on the end. So that's how you deal with it the first time. I'm going to show you how we deal with it in subsequent rows in a second. So again, it's just a repeat of row 2, single crochet, double crochet all the way across. So I'm here at the end. Again, I'm going to change colors, so I'm not going to finish the last step of that last stitch. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to my color A2, so the second skein of color A, or if you're working from the same skein, it could be from the outside of the skein. And I'm going to change colors the exact same way that I did the first time, so I'm just going to lay my yarn over and complete the stitch. And then keeping my ends straight, as I chain 1 to turn, I'm going to tuck color B into that chain 1. And then I'll just repeat row 2 again. Alright, so I've come to the last stitch. Now I'm not going to change colors on this last stitch. I'm actually not going to start it yet. I'm not changing colors on this last stitch, but I do want to be mindful of my color A here, because like I said, you don't want that awkward float hanging out on the side of your scarf. So we want to deal with this by tucking it into our double crochet that's on the end so that it's not hanging out being all weird. So I'm going to start my double crochet, I'll yarn over, and I'll insert my hook into the stitch and pull up a loop. So the next part of the stitch before I yarn over, pull through 2, I actually want to take that color A, so the first skein, and I want to tuck it in to that yarn over, pull through 2. That way it's got a nice little home inside that stitch. And then when I complete the stitch, I want to do the same thing. So it can get a little confusing. Try not to get these two skeins mixed up because they are the same color. If you do get confused what is what, just give it a tug and you can see which one you're working off of. You can see that this skein is the one that's wrapped around my hook. So this is the one that I want to be working with. And I'm not worried about this because this is my end that I'm going to weave in at the end. So when I complete the yarn over, pull through 2 to complete the stitch, again, I'm going to bring that other color A forward and tuck it into that yarn over, pull through. And then the same thing when I chain 1 to start the next stitch, I'm going to tuck it into that chain 1. So there it is, nice and tucked into that double crochet so you don't have that awkward float hanging out. So next I want to address this. So this is going to happen. Your skeins are going to get tangled up and it just happens and you just have to deal with it. So what I like to do is I'm working with this color here. I'm just going to go ahead and untangle that one from the bunch, because that's the one I'm working with and that's the only one I'm concerned about right now. So your skeins are going to get tangled up. It's going to happen. Just try and manage it before it gets too out of control. So again, I'm going to repeat row 2, single crochet, double crochet all the way across. So once you get past these first couple rows, managing the ends gets a little bit easier because you don't have the first ends hanging out in your way and it's a little bit easier to see what's going on. So you just got to get past these first couple color changes and it gets a lot easier. So again, I almost did a double crochet there, but then realized that this is a double crochet, so I need to chain, or I need to do a single crochet. Okay, so here I am at my last stitch. So I'm not going to start this double crochet yet. I will show you how to deal with that. So I need to double crochet into this last stitch, but I need to deal with color B to kind of tuck in that float before I pick it up. So I'm going to yarn over, insert my hook and pull up a loop. And then before I do the next step of this double crochet, I'm going to tuck color B into that yarn over, pull through 2. And I'm not going to complete the stitch with that color because I need to pick up color B. So as I pick up color B, I want to tuck color A into that last pull through 2. And you also want to be mindful as you're picking up the next color that things aren't getting too tight. You want to make sure that you have a little bit of wiggle room here so that your ends aren't pulling too tight to make your scarf pucker. So then I'm going to chain 1, and as I chain 1, I'm going to tuck color A into that chain 1. And then here I am again, nice and tangled. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to untangle color B from the bunch because that's what I'm working with now. I got nice and tangled here. And I'm just going to put her over here so that she's free to work with. And then again, you're going to repeat row 2. Single crochet, double crochet. So here I am at the last stitch. I'm going to start my double crochet, and remember I need to pick up my next color A. So before I do the first yarn over pull through 2, I'm going to tuck color A into that yarn over pull through 2. And then I'm going to complete the stitch with the new color, tucking color B into that last pull through 2. And then give things kind of a little bit of a tug to make sure you're not making anything too tight. And then take color B, tuck it into that chain 1 before you turn. And you'll see as you start to go, those ends are nice and tucked in, out of the way, and you don't have any awkward floats hanging out. So to be clear, the stripe pattern is 2 rows of color A, 1 row color B, 2 rows of color A2, and then 1 row of color B. So you'll repeat that throughout. So then you'll go back to 2 rows of color A, 1 row color B, 2 rows color A2, and then 1 row of color B. So you'll repeat that for a total of 99 rows. And like I said, you can add stitch markers to help keep track of your rows. I like to add these every 20 rows just so you don't have to go back and count so much. And so if you do some quick math, that's actually 33 stripes of color B. So if you just want to count your B stripes, once you have 33, then that should be halfway through the scarf. And then what you do is you simply just swap out color B for color C, and you'll repeat the same patterning. So 2 rows of A, 1 row of C, 2 rows of color A2, and then 1 row of C. And then it's the same thing for the second half of the scarf. You'll do it'll be 101 rows. So it'll be 99 rows plus 2 more so that you end on a repeat of 2 rows of color A. And then of course, once you have all of your rows, be sure to fasten off and sew in all of your ends. If you'd like to block it at this point, you can. So to make your fringe, you're going to need to cut pieces of yarn, and the length of the yarn is kind of up to you. For the sample, I went for about 6 inches of fringe. So for whatever length of fringe you want to cut your pieces of yarn a little bit over double that length. So for 6 inches, I wanted to cut a little over 12 inches of length because when it's folded in half, that's the length of the fringe. So I went for about 13 inches just so I had a little bit of wiggle room so I could trim it to make it nice and even. So for each piece of fringe, you will need 2 pieces of color A and 1 piece of color B. So for on the first side, you're going to make your fringe out of color A and color B, and then on the second side, you're going to make it with color A and color C. So if you're making the other side, you'll do 2 pieces of color A and 1 piece of color C. So just for demonstration purposes, I just cut a random length of yarn using 2 pieces of A and 1 piece of color B. And you'll want to make sure to measure it to make sure it's the length that you want. So use your tape measure. So you'll take your pieces for your fringe and then you will cut them in half, or you will fold them in half to create a loop at the midway point. then you'll take your scarf, and we're going to zoom in so you can see. You'll take the end of your scarf and insert your hook wherever you want to add the fringe, and put your hook into the midway point where you folded the yarn in half, and pull all that yarn through where you inserted your hook. Keep your hook inside the loop of the fringe, and then place the rest of the lengths of the fringe over your hook, and then pull it all the way through that loop. And this part can be a little bit tricky because you have all those pieces of yarn. So it's helpful to kind of tug it up and make that loop a little bit bigger to get it all through. And then all you want to do is take it, and you can fiddle around with this just to make it look neat. Get all those ends pulled nice and tight so they look neat. And then you'll repeat that all the way across. You can add as much or as little as you'd like to make it fuller. I'm gonna go every other stitch, but I want to make sure that I end with one at the very end here. So next, once you have all your pieces on, you will want to make sure to trim all of the fringe to make it the same length. So I'll insert some clips here of me making my actual fringe. Next, you might find it helpful to use either a big ruler like I like to use, and you can line everything up to make sure that it's nice and straight. And then the easiest thing to do is to use a fabric cutter and just roll it across to cut everything nice and straight. So this is the finished scarf. I love how it comes out. Like I said, I think this would make a great gift or a gift for yourself. It's just a really nice scarf. So if you make this scarf, I would love it if you would tag me on social media when you share it, because I'd love to see the scarves that you make. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.